During the reign of Uther Pendragon, in the wake of the dragon-shaped star, Merlin foretold the coming of Arthur, a great warrior king who would defend his country and faith from foreign invaders and natural disasters. From the old Roman order that had withered and died, Arthur would sow the seeds of a nation that was to become Great Britain. Today Arthur's name lives on, but did he ever really exist? Alan Wilson and Baram Blackett have gone further than any other researchers in establishing the facts behind the legend. Since 1977, they have been re-evaluating the most ancient British texts. Some of their astonishing findings have been published, but it is only now that the full story can be told. Not only have they identified two Arthurs, but they've also found physical evidence to support their claims. Their research shows a long-crafted conspiracy to rewrite our history and deny our true heritage. The book that really brought Arthur to the attention of the world was The History of the Kings of Britain, written in 1135 by Geoffrey of Monmouth. Arthur's name had been recorded before, but it was this work that portrayed him as a knightly king, chivalrous in all his deeds.
Now, the problem immediately was that he proclaimed an Arthur who fought the Romans, and an Arthur who fought and defeated the Saxons and others. The immediate problem is that you have a 200 and maybe 25 or 250-year-old king. This was pointed out by Polydore Virgil, the historian for Henry VIII of the Six Wives, and said, look, this is impossible that you've got a 250-year-old king here. He can't fight the Romans and the Saxons. In the usual negative stance which is taken towards Welsh history and to most ancient British history, this was immediately used to say, oh, this history is false. But the obvious answer is that there are two King Arthurs. And there are two. And the man who fought the Romans did so in 383 to 88, and is very clearly recorded, and very well recorded, authenticated. And the man who fought the Saxons in the 6th century is a 6th generation direct descendant in the male line, and he is Arthur II. So you do have two kings, 200 years apart, both of them warrior kings. One fights the Romans, one fights the Saxons.
With a great conqueror and defender rolled into one mighty king, their fame lived on within the Arthur legend. Today, a mystery surrounds the real Arthurs, but that was not always the case. In the Brutes of England, written between the 10th and 15th century, Arthur is clearly recorded.
So the Brutes of England actually commence with the invasion of Albine from Syria, which is actually datable to about 1600 BC. And they roll on through the centuries, and as they come on, they become more and more detailed. Now, King Arthur is given quite a significant place in these histories. He gets quite a lot of space. And the coverage is again melding together or welding together King Arthur I and King Arthur II. Now, if we look at King Arthur II, we'll find there's a very interesting reference to him in the Brutes of England. And you've got to remember that up until modern times, this would have been generally firmly believed as authentic history. So in chapter 79, it's telling how King Arthur is over in France, Brittany area. And it's on about the Easter time. And it says, and when King Arthur had thus his knights feasted at April after next sowing being springtime, he came again into Britain, his own land. And after at Whitsuntide next sowing, by counsel of his barons, he would be crowned King of Glamorgan. So everybody in Britain, certainly England and Wales, would have been in no doubt whatsoever from the Brutes of England that King Arthur II, at least, was a king of Glamorgan and Gwent, certainly King of Glamorgan. There can be no doubt about this. It's a very clear statement.
Another historian called Percy Enderby, writing for Charles II, made no secret of there being a real King Arthur.
his history really commences with the Brutus story of the great Brutus migration and moving into Britain, which is as routinely dismissed as is the Albine invasion, although there's a great deal of physical evidence extant today to prove that both are true. And so what is happening is that you have a history which was recognizable to everybody as British history, certainly up until 1700. And then suddenly things begin to change and move. By 1850 they were writing histories of Britain that bear no resemblance whatsoever in the early stages, no resemblance whatsoever to the previous histories of Britain. Out go Albine, out go Brutus, out go this, out goes everything. And you have a brand new history. It's like George Orwell, 1714 and not 1984. It's an Orwellian maneuver, and they are restyling, rewriting, reinventing a history for political and religious correctness. And that's what's happened. They've rewritten the histories. What they didn't want, they simply derided, abused, and abandoned.
With the threat of revolution sweeping Europe and the Americas, and with German George on the throne, the historians were directed to play down any nationalistic feelings and emphasise our Anglo-Saxon past. The Arthur legend had to go.
History is the most important of all political weapons. Have no doubt about it. May not be so instant like a war or like a dropping of a bomb, but it is the most potent of all political weapons. And so they decided they would introduce a history that was suitable to the church, which was suitable to the state. And so they suddenly you found Bishop Stubbs was appointed Professor of History in Oxford University, a convinced fundamental Christian. Noah's Ark, sons of Noah, populate the entire world. His grandsons, everybody is descended from Noah. In Cambridge, a man named Edwin Guest, a fanatical fundamental Christian, same old as Stubbs, is appointed Professor of History. Didn't even apply for the job. And so you had these two fanatics busy reconstructing and rewriting British history in a suitable biblical manner to suit the church, to suit the support of the royal family. And so everything that didn't suit that political necessity, that was not politically correct, had to go. King Arthur had to go, both of them. Of course, they would have got away with this. I think they would have got away with it if it hadn't been for King Arthur. I mean, both King Arthurs. But if it had not been for the Arthur legend, they would have got away with it. But he stood there too big and too powerful, too well placed in the people's mind, imagination, a linchpin, a cornerstone. They couldn't get rid of him.
Growing up in South Wales, Alan was familiar with the local stories of Arthur and his knights. With the brutes of England confirming Arthur as a Glamorgan king, it was logical for him and Baron to return to Wales. With a nation and history unchanged for 2,000 years, the memory of Arthur lives on in its songs and poems, its parchment and stone, and in the very landscape itself. In a Nevern churchyard is the stone of a king called Hal Dar, or Hal the Good. Around 920 AD, a king list was drawn up for the wedding of his son, Prince Owen. This document, called the Harleian 3859, still survives today in the British Museum. It contains the names of both Arthurs.
383, the armies of the British invaded Gaul. And the general of Magnus's armies was his son Arthur. The Latins called him Andragathius. And he defeated Gratian, the Emperor of Rome. He defeated Gratian in battle at Soissons, which they called the Battle of Sassy in Geoffrey of Monmouth, chased him to Lyons, lugged him, invited him to a meal and executed him.